The power brokers of Hollywood have been an unreached people group, and they just happen to be the most influential unreached people group on the planet. Fell in love with them, decided to make them my object of missionary outreach effort, love them into the kingdom.
Our guest today is Dr. Larry Poland of Master Media International, reaching out to Hollywood insiders. I'm Wayne Shepherd. Welcome to this week's First Person. You'll meet our guest in just a moment. Now, with a new year underway, this may be a new habit for you to listen to this program. If so, welcome. We introduce you to people every week who are making a difference in the world as they are called and equipped by God to do remarkable things. As I look over the diverse list of past guests, it's incredible how they all have one thing in common. They are compelled by the love of Christ to uniquely serve Him. You'll find that list of past guests and conversations to listen to at firstpersoninterview.com. Just click on the archive button and scroll down through the programs. Today, I've invited Dr. Larry Poland to tell us, first of all, how God called and prepared him, and secondly, what impact he's having in the culture of Hollywood. Larry has recently written the book Chasm, Crossing the Divide Between Hollywood and People of Faith, and he tells us his story today on First Person.
Well, I was born in Ohio, but I grew up in a very Christian little town, which people in the Midwest, if they're over 50 or 60, certainly know. Winona Lake, Indiana. It billed itself as the home of the world's largest Bible conference, and at that time I think it probably was.
Yeah.
Billy Sunday, the great American evangelist, the city that Billy Sunday could not shut down was Chicago, according to the song, Chicago, Chicago. And that was a very Christian town. We had two Christian evangelical denominations and two seminaries and about 20 other Christian organizations at the time. And so it was a really wonderful environment to grow up. Every summer, the various organizations, including Moody Bible Institute, held their annual conventions there, and for a kid, it was a great environment.
Of course.
For a Christian kid, it was a terrible environment because I was working in the hotels of the community. I started at the cheapest hotel and moved my way up to the most expensive hotel, the Westminster Hotel, and in the process, I got to see way too many Christians. It sounds really maybe unkind to say that, but I learned that a lot of the people who are the big names, in quotes, in the evangelical world really don't walk the talk. And when you work in a hotel, you know everybody's secrets, you know. So by the time I was 16, I was a little disillusioned, not by Jesus and not really by the church. My church was a very solid Bible-teaching church. It was a Brethren church, and our motto was the Bible, the whole Bible, and nothing but the Bible. And so it was pretty straight arrow, and I was a good kid. I didn't drink or smoke or chew or go with girls that do, and married as a virgin and all that good stuff. But I was disillusioned by the people in Christian leadership, particularly, that didn't walk the talk.
Boy, that would be hard to see that at such a young age then. But you went on to Wheaton College, right?
Well, I did, and that was a good experience. I had a great time there and never let my studies interfere with my social life. And I didn't have a serious thought till I got to seminary, and then I only had 3 or 4, as I recall. But anyway, I always had a very deep commitment to Jesus. I'd settled that as a 5-year-old kid walking the aisle in an evangelical United Brethren church in Mansfield, Ohio. And I had an experience that we don't talk about much more. The old saints used to talk about the awakening of the soul. Mm-hmm. It was an experience short of saving faith in which one recognized that he's a sinner, he needed salvation, he recognized that Jesus was the Savior, but was short of full surrender. And then my dad was transferred to a real tough railroad town in Ohio, Lima, Ohio, home of the Lima Locomotive Works. Yep. They built, locomotives,
sure.
Steam locomotives.
I know it well. My wife is from Findlay, Ohio, so I know Lima very well.
We're neighbors.
Yep.
And I got beat up periodically coming home from school to the terror of my mother. But my dad was only there 6 months, but it was the providence of God, Wayne, because an evangelist, in those days we had lots of traveling evangelists, that went from city to city and around the world. Holding evangelistic meetings, and a converted Jewish attorney named Hyman Appleman was holding meetings there during that 6 months that my dad was stationed there as part of the Texaco Oil Company. And he spoke one night on when the Lord returns, some will be taken and some will be left. Well, for an 8-year-old kid, went home, went to bed, and woke up in the middle of the night and called for mom and dad, and they didn't answer. And Wayne, I was sure I'd been left. And I started to cry, and mom heard my cry and came in and said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "Oh, I thought I'd been left," like the man said. So she said, "Well, you don't have to worry about that. You can invite Jesus into your life." And so I got down on my knees, and mom and I prayed. And I've never had a doubt. That was 1948. I've never had a doubt that Jesus Christ was in my life and I was his from that day on. It's been wonderful to have the assurance of salvation and of the reality of Jesus in my life.
Right. Well, Larry, if I may, it's a long ways from Winona Lake, Indiana to Hollywood, so you got to tell me just briefly what happened in the intervening years.
Well, I've lived three lifetimes in Christian service. I gave my life to Jesus for whatever he wanted to do on a park bench in Bremerhaven, Germany in 1956 as an exchange student. Huh. I was venting my hostilities at God for the hypocrites and the people who didn't walk the talk in my community or whatever. And I got this message, and it was, "You have any problem with Jesus?" Well, I had to admit I didn't have any problem with Jesus. It was just the people who called themselves his followers. And I got a second message. It said, "If you just keep your eyes on me, on Jesus, let me take care of the rest of the stuff, you'll be okay." And I thought, gee, that's pretty profound and simple. And so I determined to do that. I was going to keep my eyes on him. And if everybody flaked out and we ran off with the secretary and absconded with the deficit or whatever, it was going to be okay with me because my faith didn't depend on Christians. It depended on Christ. And I said, "Okay, Lord, you can have my life. I'll give him my plans to be an architect." I wanted to build, suspension bridges and skyscrapers and have my name in the cornerstone. "I'll give you my life, and you do with it anything you want, but on one condition: if you ever fail me, it's all over." Because I'd been failed by pastors and Christian leaders and whatever, and that was June of 1956. And when I look at the one-loss record between Jesus and me over all these years, frankly, he's got an undefeated,
pretty good record, right?
Yeah. And oh boy, have I failed him! I jokingly say, with some seriousness, if I were he, I wouldn't have put up with me this long. But I was serious, and I went to Wheaton, went to Grace Seminary, and entered Christian service as the youngest college president in America. At age 27, I was the president of Miami Christian College, Miami, Florida. And that was a baptism of fire, and I got the job because one Friday I prayed, "Lord, I feel like I've got poverty in my so-called Christian life. I hadn't experienced the Spirit-filled life at that point. And I said, "Lord, give me a job to do so big, if you don't undertake, I'll be sunk. And maybe then I'll learn to live on your power instead of my talent." And I prayed that prayer on Friday, and on Monday, the board of that school that was really struggling invited me to come be the president, and had the silliness to give me a unanimous invitation. And in the next 6 years, Wayne, there wasn't a week went by I didn't have something to face. There's no way under God's heaven I could have ever done it in my own self-effort. So I learned the Spirit-filled life by the crucible of being overwhelmed in response to that.
It was sink or swim, huh?
It was a liberating experience to learn that the only one who can live the Christ life is Christ himself through us in the Holy Spirit.
And so 6 years as a college president, what happened after that?
A guy named Bill Bright, at that time a little mustachioed guy who ran this Christian organization called Campus Crusade for Christ.
Well, struggling work, yeah.
Yeah, well, it was, it wasn't very massive at that point. This is 1973. I had for about a month a strange notion that I was supposed to talk to him. I didn't know him, never seen him. I think maybe I saw a few minutes of one of their crusade videos or something, but and this annoying message I was supposed to talk to Bill Bright wouldn't go away. And so finally I prayed, "Lord, if this is of you, then make it stronger. If it's not, please take it away. It's annoying." And about that time, the campus director at University of Miami called and asked me to speak to their Master Action Group, their leadership group on the campus. And I said, "This is crazy, but I've been having this notion I'm supposed to meet with Bill Bright, and I know nothing about your organization. I know nothing about Bill. I don't know why I'm supposed to meet with him, but I think it's of the Lord. And I'm ready, frankly, to fly to California if I have to meet with him." And he said, "Well, funny you should say that. You won't have to fly to California. He's coming into Florida tomorrow morning." So I said, can you get me an hour with him? He says, it'll be tough, but I'll try. And he did, and I flew to Orlando. We sat down, and I said, Dr. Bright, I don't have any clue why I'm meeting with you, except I believe the Holy Spirit's been prompting me to do so. And he said, well, just have lunch and have prayer and see where the Lord leads it. Well, to shorten the story, Wayne, I was invited by him then within the next year to head a new division of crusade, like a Christian Peace Corps, called the Agape Movement. The vision was to put 100,000 Bill Bright never had a small thought.
No, he didn't.
100,000 young volunteers all over the world with the hope and trust that as they went mostly from college into the world to share their vocational skills as a foot in the door, and the gospel, that they would love it and become lifetime missionaries. And, in 8 years, we put about 800 volunteers in 35 nations. And about 30% of those people did stay on as career missionaries.
Wow.
So I did that with them, and then in 1980, I had the turning point that took me past education and past international service into the whole story of Hollywood.
And we'll get to that part of Larry Poland's story coming up in the second half of today's interview on First Person. Stay tuned. First Person has partnered with Mission Aviation Fellowship to make available to you a free copy of the classic book Jungle Pilot, telling the life story of early missionary aviation pilot Nate Saint and the pioneering work of MAF. I've narrated this special audio edition of Jungle Pilot, and a free download is available at firstpersoninterview.com. Your whole family will enjoy listening to Jungle Pilot. To download, visit firstpersoninterview.com. My guest today is Larry Poland. Dr. Poland is founder, chairman, and CEO of Master Media International, and his latest book is entitled Chasm, Crossing the Divide Between Hollywood and People of Faith. And Larry, we've been hearing your story, and I know we have to skip an awful lot of it, but you eventually did end up in Hollywood with this burden to reach out into that community with a Christian witness. And I just want to talk to you about that whole experience, first of all, and second of all, your assessment of where we are today.
Well, Wayne, the providence of God is mysterious, and I'm interested and intrigued by the passage that says it's the glory of God to conceal a matter, and it's the glory of man to expose it. And God has his secrets, and he works in mysterious, secret ways. And I was in Bill Bright's office one day, and that was a rare occasion. Even though I reported to him, I didn't really typically see him more than an hour a month, one-on-one. So this was precious time, and the secretary kept all the calls out while we had that precious hour together. Well, the secretary interrupted our meeting and said there's this NBC vice president who wanted to talk to Bill, and he said, do you mind if I take the call? And I said, of course not. NBC vice president doesn't call every day. And he got on the phone, and the VP of public relations for NBC in Burbank, had a PR problem, and angry Christians were, and by the way, I had an executive at a big company in Hollywood say, angry Christian is a redundancy for us. It's the only kind we know.
Oh, how sad. Wow.
So, yeah, very sad. So anyway, he had a PR problem. A rumor was being spread in the South that NBC was going to show a movie of the week at Christmas time called Mary and Joseph. And in the opening scene in that, a Roman soldier molests Mary with the implication that Jesus is the illegitimate offspring of that union. Well, that'd be enraging anyone. The only problem was these characters in the South never checked the rumor. It was never true. They didn't understand that a public company wasn't going to air a film defaming Jesus at Christmas time, for sure. So they were burying this dear man with hate mail. This was pre-internet days, or I'm sure there would have been emails and phone calls and whatever. And he was deluged. He was buried, and he was trying to put out the fire. So he was calling a group of, quote, religious leaders to come to see a pre-screening of the film at the studio, and then issue a joint press release saying the rumor's false. The film is fine. So I heard Bill say to the executive, well, my schedule doesn't permit me. I send one of my trusted coworkers, and he obviously said yes. So I showed up at the screening room with the usual motley assortment of, priests, rabbis, and ministers. About 20 of us in the room, and saw the film. The film was wonderful. I never saw it again. I don't know who produced it, but it was very redemptive, and it was accurate to the story of Jesus. And So at the end of the screening, I stepped up to the exec, and there was a young evangelical minister in front of me. And he was angry. He was ticked, and I don't know why. Maybe he was just typically angry. I don't know. I didn't know the man, but he was dumping on this exec and saying outrageous things and was incredibly disrespectful. And the more he kind of beat up on this exec, the more I wanted to crawl through the floorboards. Finally, he spun on his heels and walked out, and I stepped up to the exec and said, "Hi, I'm Larry Poland with Campus Crusade, and I'm going to recommend that Dr. Bright sign the press release. I think the film is fine. But, sir, I owe you an apology." He says, "Well, what's that?" I said, "Well, I couldn't help overhearing what this young man said and the way he said it. And I've been a follower of Jesus since I was a kid. He's the most important person in my life and has been my whole life. But, sir, I believe with all my heart if Jesus had been in front of me in line, he would not have spoken to as this young man did, with disrespect and unkindness. So please, on behalf of those of us that are followers of Jesus, please forgive us and don't hold it against our Lord." Wayne, I thought he was going to fall in the heap, thought he'd go unconscious. There was like a 3 count of silence, and then his first words were, "Can I take you to lunch?" Dear guy had been beat up so long for so many months, and now then someone stuck on an olive branch, and there's no so.
So that led you into what you do with Master Media.
Bingo. Yeah, in fact, Bill, when I got back and reported on it, he said, "Have you ever considered ministry in the entertainment industry in Hollywood?" And I guess, "No." "Well, would you?" And I said, "No." He said, "Why not?" I said, "I don't know anything about Hollywood. I grew up in this little squeaky clean Christian town. Winona Lake at one time had written in the town charter you had to be born again to own property. That's how Christian it was." So I said, and he said, "Well, would you pray about it?" I said, "Well, yeah, and I'm not saying I won't do it. You're my boss after all, but I know nothing about it."
It was hard to say no to Bill Bright, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, especially when you signed your paycheck.
Yeah.
So he said, "Well, pray about it. The Hollywood's still in the innocence of our kids and the purity of the church." And I go, "Well, I'm not disagreeing with you, but I thought you were kind of asking if I had any interest or whatever." So I did 6 months of research, got by secretaries on the role of faith in media.
Okay.
I like to have 30 minutes of your boss's time to figure out, what his worldview is in this. And so during that time, Wayne, I fell in love with the people.
Okay.
It's an unreached people group, and I started ministering then.
Yeah, and that's what I want to talk to you about, because as I've watched you and interacted with you through the years, Larry, we have just a few minutes left, but you see people in Hollywood as people, first of all. Not to be hated, not to be vilified, but you see them as people that Christ died for.
It's not a battlefield; it's a mission field. And in the entire history of the entertainment industry, nobody. I've been doing this 34 years. I've never found any structure that systematically pursued the executives, a trust relationship with the executives, not the celebrities. They come and go. They're traded like baseball cards. But the power brokers of Hollywood have been an unreached people group, and they just happen to be the most influential and reached people group on the planet. Fell in love with them, decided to make them my object of missionary outreach effort, love them into the kingdom, because they're all just one miracle away, no matter how debauched or wretched they may be.
But I'm sure that's brought you a measure of criticism from those who don't understand why you would, quote, support people like that.
Yeah, I had a guy tell me, why I don't get what you're doing. Hollywood deserves to go to hell. And I go, excuse me, as I read the book, we all deserve to go to hell. And if I were in charge and I didn't know the Lord, I think I'd probably be doing this stuff as bad or worse than those people are who don't know the Lord, who run the industry.
Well, you've been in Hollywood for some very interesting times. I mean, everything from The Last Temptation of Christ through The Passion of the Christ and Christian filmmakers coming onto the scene. Give me a sense of what's going on today and how we can pray.
Well, the essence of that is described in my book, Chasm. This is my piece de resistance. I've been wanting to write this book for probably 15 years and have had notes going back almost that far. Most people don't have a clue what Hollywood is really, how it functions really, the dynamics of the industry from a moral, spiritual values point of view. And the book is written primarily for Christians, but there's this chasm in which most of the leadership on both sides, the evangelical Christian community and the Hollywood community leadership, they've been wasting time for 100 years of the film business and 50, 60 years of the TV business, lobbing mortar shells at each other, not really establishing any love, trust relationships where they could sit down and say, we really differ, but I respect you as a human being.
So there is blame on both sides, right?
Oh boy, and some people aren't gonna like the book because I'm not shy. In fact, one of my favorite chapters is called "The Ambassadors of Peace Take Up Arms," and it's a parable about this group of Christians that discover a bunch of cannibals in a jungle in Urundi or somewhere, and they decide that they're going to stop their cannibalism, and so they first start by protesting, and they march around the village carrying placards, and before they know it, they're being buried with fiery arrows from inside the village, and they say, "Oops, this isn't working." So then they decide, "I know, let's boycott them. We'll shut down their trinket business and close every trading post within 20 miles, and we'll." And the parable, obviously, is we've used the kind of those kind of tactics on Hollywood, and we would never consider using them on cannibals. We would go and try to build love and trust and share the love of Jesus and serve them until we had got an entree to their hearts, and then we'd share the good news, and they'd come to Jesus and be revolutionized. So. Yeah. That's the book. So the book goes pretty tough on evangelicals and their anger strategies, and it analyzes at a much more nuanced level than just we disagree on homosexuality and abortion.
It sure does. Yeah, it's a good read. It really is. Just a final question here, Larry. I wish we had more time to talk about these things, and your book goes into great detail, and I hope people will read Chasm. But what keeps you going? Are you hopeful? Are you seeing progress?
What's keeping me going is I'm seeing a harvest. I've been working this 34 years, and those first 20-some years were pretty lean. Did an awful lot of planting, an awful lot of watering, and now it's increased. We're seeing more openness. We're seeing it particularly among Jewish people in the community. Less hostility, more openness to talk about Jesus, about spiritual things. And I'm sure it's because of the 25th anniversary of the Media Leader Prayer Calendar, which we mobilized, as I said, 25 years ago to get people like you, listener, to pray and become involved. In fact, go to our website, mastermediaintl.org, and sign up and get the list of the most powerful person and the most influential person for that day to pray for every morning before you launch your day. And you can have a ministry in Hollywood just like me, and together we're seeing awesome things happen. God gave me an opportunity to address the 25 most powerful executives in the legendary studio recently, and that just doesn't happen for evangelicals, but for the grace of God.
The calendar that Larry and Master Media produces is called the Media Leader and Cultural Influencer Prayer Calendar, and it's a very effective way to pray for and encourage members of the media. We've placed links to that prayer calendar as well as Larry Poland's book, Chasm, Crossing the Divide Between Hollywood and People of Faith, at our website, firstpersoninterview.com. Once again, that's firstpersoninterview.com, where you'll also find our archive of past programs as well as the schedule of what's coming up over the next few weeks. Now, if you'd like to leave a comment on what you've heard on today's program or on any past program, please use our Facebook page for that purpose. It's facebook.com/firstpersoninterview. You can like our page and leave comments at facebook.com/firstpersoninterview. We're also available on iTunes. You can download First Person each week automatically when you subscribe through iTunes. Just visit our website for more information, firstpersoninterview.com. Next week, you'll meet a doctor who's involved in providing medical training to doctors in Africa, some who have been deeply affected by the Ebola crisis. Bruce Steffes will be with us next time. Now, with thanks to my friend and producer Joe Carlson, I'm Wayne Shepherd. Thank you for listening, and join us next week for First Person.